just want to get this over with so you can get back to the mall, don't you? Oh, you're in a nice mood tonight. Have you been out? No, you don't do your shopping yet. Have you been in one of the shopping malls at all?
Johnny Carson smiled at his guests every night on TV, but behind that smile was pure hate for one powerful star. This guest could appear on the show whenever he wanted. He sent his jokes ahead of time. Every interview was scripted. Carson could not say no. For 30 years, he pretended to like this man while raging behind closed doors. He even mocked the guest's stiff performances to his staff. This battle between TV giants stayed hidden for years, until now. Let's get into it. Johnny Carson was born on October 23, 1925, in Corning, Iowa. He had an older sister and a younger brother and grew up in a modest home where dreams always seemed far away. When Johnny was 8, his family moved to Norfolk, Nebraska. It was there that his life quietly started to change. One day he found a magic book at a friend's house. That book sparked something in him. He ordered a cheap magic kit by mail and practiced day and night, chasing his family around the house saying, "Pick a card, any card." His mother made him a homemade cape, and by the time he was 14, Johnny was performing as the Great Carson at small-town clubs, earning $3 a show. Those early shows planted the first seeds of the performer he would one day become. When Johnny turned 18, World War II was raging. He joined the United States Navy and entered an officer training program at Columbia University. While learning military skills, he never stopped entertaining others with his magic tricks. Later, he was stationed on the USS Pennsylvania. The ship had survived Pearl Harbor but took heavy damage before Johnny arrived. His job involved decoding enemy messages, a task that required precision and patience. One of his first duties was grim and unforgettable, supervising the removal of 20 dead sailors. The war ended just days after he boarded, but he stayed in service, boxing in amateur matches and putting together an impressive record. A key moment came when the Secretary of the Navy asked Johnny about his future plans. Johnny performed a magic trick for him, and when the tough secretary laughed and smiled, Johnny knew if he could entertain that man, he could entertain anyone. After the war, Carson used the GI Bill to attend the University of Nebraska, finishing his degree in radio and speech in just 3 years. His thesis was about writing comedy for radio. In 1950, he started working at WWAM and WWTV in Omaha. His first TV show, The Squirrel's Nest, was full of silly stunts like fake interviews with pigeons. At night, he hosted church dinners for extra cash, sometimes making fun of the very politicians who attended. A lucky break came when a politician's wife, who owned stock in a Los Angeles station, recommended Johnny for a job in California. Soon, he was hosting a low-budget TV show called Carson's Cellar, which caught the attention of Red Skelton. Skelton hired Johnny as a writer, but fate had bigger plans. One night, right before a live show, Skelton got hurt. Johnny filled in and wowed the audience. Suddenly, everyone in the industry knew his name. By 1957, Carson moved to New York City to host a game show called Who Do You Trust? The show was not just about questions and answers, it was about quick thinking, reading people, and being funny on the spot. Johnny got better every day, and he also met Ed McMahon there, beginning a partnership that would last decades. As Carson's fame grew, NBC started looking for someone to replace Jack Paar on The Tonight Show. They needed someone smart, funny, and calm under pressure. Carson was the obvious choice. On October 1, 1962, Johnny Carson took over The Tonight Show, and television would never be the same. From the beginning, Carson put his stamp on the show. He made the opening monologue fast and punchy, never telling too many jokes about the same topic. He created a rhythm, jokes, skits, interviews, music, all timed just right. He refused to get political even when the writers pushed him, because he believed the show should make everyone feel welcome. In 1972, he made a bold move by shifting the show from New York to Burbank, California. He wanted easier access to Hollywood stars, and it worked. The Tonight Show became the place where careers were made. If Johnny liked you, you were set. If he did not, you might never be invited back. By the time he retired in 1992, he had hosted over 4,500 episodes and had changed the meaning of late-night TV forever. Offstage, Johnny was a different man. He was shy, almost distant. He did not meet guests before the show. He believed it kept the energy real when the cameras rolled. Barbara Meltzer, who worked behind the scenes, said Carson was quiet and careful, saving all his sparkle for the stage. Meetings before tapings were short. Johnny preferred to know just enough to keep things moving but left plenty of room for surprises. He hated commercial breaks because they interrupted the natural flow of conversation. Sometimes, if a guest was in the middle of a great story, he would come back visibly annoyed after a commercial break. Johnny had his own way of dealing with guests he did not like. He did not fake laughs. If a guest was boring or rehearsed, Johnny would turn to the band instead of continuing the conversation. It was a clear signal that the guest had bombed. Even legends like Bob Hope did not escape Johnny's cold shoulder when their appearances felt stiff or too scripted. From 1962 to 1992, Johnny Carson smiled on camera, but deep down he was frustrated. What bothered him most was Bob Hope's power at NBC. Hope had been a big name at the network since 1950. He had so much pull that he could put himself on The Tonight Show whenever he wanted. If Hope had a special to promote, he just picked up the phone, called the right person, and got himself booked. No waiting, no asking, just telling. Carson hated it, but he could not say no. Every time Hope's team called, Carson would sigh and mutter, again, before giving in. It got so bad that Carson's staff started joking about giving Hope a permanent dressing room at the studio. Even though Carson pulled in millions of viewers every night, he still had to bow to Hope. He would tell his team, half joking but half serious, "You cannot turn down Bob Hope." The real problem was not just the favoritism. It was the way Hope handled his appearances. Carson loved real conversation. He liked quick-thinking jokes that came naturally, stories that felt real. Hope did not do any of that. He would send his writers ahead of time with a full script, jokes, questions, and answers all written out. By the time Hope sat down on the couch, everything was already planned. There was no real talk, no fun moments, it was stiff, it was fake. Carson hated it. Hope wouldn't budge an inch from the script, while Carson could joke about anything from politics to space. Hope would shuffle through his cue cards like he was reading a play. Watching Carson try to make it look natural was painful. One writer said it felt like watching a man drown while smiling. Sometimes their tension boiled over behind the scenes. One night in January 1981 at Ronald Reagan's first presidential gala, Hope crossed a line. Carson was supposed to headline. Hope was on later with a smaller role. But right before the show, Hope handed Carson some handwritten jokes and said, "Here, maybe you can use these." Carson smiled politely and said, "Thanks, but I'm all set." As soon as Hope walked away, Carson turned to his team and exploded, "Can you believe the nerve of that guy?" Another time, after a great monologue that had the audience roaring, Hope asked if he could borrow the sound of Carson's audience laughing for one of his specials. Carson, stunned, agreed. Weeks later, Carson was watching TV with friends and said he could hear Ed McMahon's laugh helping Hope's bad jokes sound better. Carson told that story for years afterward, half laughing, half furious. Their rivalry was not just about personal slights. It was a battle between the old and the new. Hope stood for the old NBC, the radio days, the 1950s. Carson was the new king, bringing fresh comedy and a cooler style. When Carson moved The Tonight Show from New York to Burbank, he had to use a studio that had been built for Hope, a $3 million project back in the 50s. Even though it was Carson's show now, the studio was still considered Hope's whenever he wanted it. Hope specials always got better promotion too. NBC would advertise them during The Tonight Show, but they never returned the favor when Carson had his own specials. No matter how high Carson's ratings climbed, NBC executives still treated Hope like the real star, and Carson knew it. That sting never really went away. In private, Carson did not hide how he felt. When Hope got older and started messing up live appearances, struggling with hearing aids, missing cues, reading the wrong lines, Carson would joke darkly with his team. "If I ever end up like that," he once said during a break, "I want you guys to shoot me." It was not just one bad night either. He repeated that feeling over and over in private conversations. At home, Carson would sometimes do cruel impressions of Hope fumbling through cue cards. Staffers called it the Hope Shuffle. It hurt Carson to see what Hope had become, but it scared him even more. Watching Hope cling to the spotlight made Carson swear he would never let himself grow old on TV. That is one big reason why Carson chose to retire while he was still on top in 1992. The pattern of broken friendships did not end with Hope. Joan Rivers was another painful chapter. In the beginning, Carson had discovered her. She had bombed on The Tonight Show years earlier under Jack Paar, her career was almost dead. But Carson saw something in her. He booked her, cheered her on, and called her a star on live TV. She became one of the show's most popular guest hosts, even becoming Carson's regular substitute by 1983. Rivers always said Carson was the one who gave her a career. Then came the betrayal. In 1986, the brand new Fox network offered Rivers her own late-night show directly against Carson's time slot. They even promised to hire her husband as the producer. Rivers did not tell Carson, she was scared. She worried the deal would fall through. She also knew NBC had not treated her fairly, offering her only one-year contracts while Carson got 2. Worse, she had found out that NBC did not even consider her as a possible successor to Carson. When the news finally broke, Carson did not hear it from Rivers. He read it in the trades. She tried to call him, but it was too late. He slammed the phone down and never spoke to her again. Carson banned Rivers from The Tonight Show for life. Unlike other comedians who left or started rival shows, Rivers got no friendly goodbye, no best wishes, nothing. He wiped her out of the show's history, and he made it clear to others too, any celebrity who went on Rivers's new show would not be welcomed back on Carson's couch. The warning worked. Rivers's show struggled. Stations dropped it. Sponsors backed away. Less than a year later, Fox fired Rivers. Just months after that, her husband Edgar took his own life. Rivers's dream of breaking through in late night ended in disaster. She spent the next 2 decades trying to patch things up with Carson. She even walked up to him in restaurants to say hello. He refused to even look at her. She was heartbroken. When Carson died in 2005, Rivers still spoke kindly of him, but she admitted she believed part of his anger came from the fact she was a woman, and women were not supposed to leave the men who made them. It was not until 2014, almost 30 years later, that Joan Rivers finally stepped back onto The Tonight Show stage during Jimmy Fallon's first episode. She called it emotional. It was her victory lap. But Carson was already gone by then. He never forgave her, and the two of them, once mentor and protege, never spoke again. In the early 1970s, Wayne Newton and Johnny Carson seemed like real friends. Newton, known as Mr. Las Vegas, appeared on The Tonight Show more than 30 times. Every time he came on, Carson praised him and joked around warmly. Their friendship looked strong both on TV and off. They were both big names in Las Vegas, performing at the same places, attending the same events. No one could have guessed that behind the smiles, a storm was slowly building. The real trouble started in 1980. Both Newton and Carson wanted to buy the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. Carson made a strong bid with his business partner thinking he had a good shot, but Newton made a bigger offer and won. Carson was furious. People close to him said he felt double-crossed. He was so upset that he never really returned to Las Vegas again. Even though Newton had won, it would cost him dearly. After losing the hotel, Carson took his anger to the stage. Every night during his monologue, he made fun of Newton. The jokes were cruel, attacking Newton's looks, his voice, even suggesting he wasn't manly enough. Some jokes hinted that Newton had shady ties to the mob. Carson's influence was huge at that time. His show reached millions, and the jokes started hurting Newton's image badly. Newton tried calling Carson to talk it out, but Carson never answered. The jokes kept coming, and the damage kept growing. Newton finally had enough. In 1982, he stormed into Carson's office during a meeting. Without waiting, he told Carson's producer to leave the room. It was just Newton and Carson now, face to face. Newton, strong and furious, didn't hold back. He told Carson the jokes had to stop immediately or else there would be a fight. Carson tried to calm him down, saying he was still a fan, but Newton wasn't buying it. He made it clear the jokes would end one way or another. After that day, Carson's jokes about Newton stopped, but the damage was already done. Newton never appeared on Carson's show again. Worse, the mob rumors kept growing. In 1986, NBC ran a report linking Newton to the Gambino crime family. Newton fought back hard, suing NBC and winning a $19 million judgment. But even though he won the case, he didn't get any money because the court ruled there was no malice. Newton said it was never about money. It was about clearing his name. He always believed Carson's jokes had started it all. Even after Carson's death in 2005, Newton called him a mean-spirited human being, showing that some wounds never heal. While Newton's battle with Carson stayed mostly behind the scenes, another wild moment in Carson's world happened right in front of the cameras. In 1975, Shelley Winters made headlines when she poured a drink on Oliver Reed's head during a Tonight Show taping. Reed had made sexist comments about women belonging in the kitchen, and Winters wasn't having it. She stormed off, came back, and dumped a whiskey cocktail right over his head. The crowd loved it. It became one of the most famous moments in late-night TV history. Winters was known for her chaotic interviews. She loved stirring things up. Once, she handed Carson a random shoe during an interview and started rambling about an unrelated movie. Carson was left speechless. Another time, she joked about Reed's mustache right after a crude joke. She didn't care about keeping things neat or polite. She just wanted a reaction. Carson didn't enjoy that kind of chaos. He liked control. He could handle quirky guests, but Winters' wild energy was too much. During one show, she kept pulling the conversation in crazy directions, from Bette Davis's tennis balls to weird jokes about Hitler. Carson kept trying to steer things back, but it was useless. His tight smile and quick commercial breaks showed how rattled he really was. Behind the scenes, producers admitted Winters was one of the few guests who truly got under Carson's skin. He usually tried to nod politely and move on, but with Winters, even that didn't work. She would just keep going no matter what. Their clashes showed something bigger happening on late-night TV. Carson liked witty jokes and calm conversations. Winters brought messy, emotional performances. She later said Carson didn't know how to handle women who weren't meek and flirty. Their tension reached its peak in 1983 when Winters showed up drunk, slurring her words and promoting her memoir. Carson ended the interview early, joking that she had promoted enough books for one night. Still, despite all the madness, Winters kept getting invited back. She appeared 18 times over 2 decades. Carson's another big feud was with Tom Snyder, the host of The Tomorrow Show, which aired right after The Tonight Show. Carson didn't just dislike Snyder quietly. After a few glasses of wine at Chasen's, a popular spot in Los Angeles, he once tore into Snyder without holding back, calling him a no-talent bore and ripping apart his style. Carson hated the way Snyder would dominate conversations and talk endlessly, while he himself believed in quick wit and smooth back and forth. Snyder's love for controversy and his self-promotion made Carson even more bitter because Carson always tried to appeal to as many people as possible. To him, Snyder wasn't just boring, he was everything wrong with good television. Howard Stern, on the other hand, had his own feelings about Johnny Carson, and they weren't much kinder. After Carson died, Stern said on his radio show that he was never a fan, even though he respected Carson's place in TV history. Stern even claimed that Carson once hit his first wife at a party, and he often talked about Carson's mean side, saying the warmth people saw on TV wasn't the real Carson. Part of Stern's anger may have come from the fact that Carson never invited him onto The Tonight Show, which in that era was a huge insult. Still, people noticed that Stern borrowed a lot from Carson's style later on, including taking a lighter work schedule as he grew more successful. Then there was Chevy Chase. For years, Carson and Chase played poker together, but there was always an edge between them. Chase made it worse by publicly mocking the idea of hosting a show like The Tonight Show, saying he would never chain himself to one thing like that. Carson, who rarely let insults slide, got his revenge in a way only he could, once saying Chase couldn't ad-lib a fart after a baked bean dinner. When Chase finally got his own late-night show in 1993, he didn't ask Carson for advice. Carson didn't hide his feelings either. He told the press that Chase didn't look comfortable on TV and that he didn't think Chase had any idea how hard the job really was. Carson was right. Chase's show collapsed after just 6 weeks. Even on live TV, when Chase and Richard Pryor appeared on Carson's show together, the tension was so thick you could feel it through the screen. When it came to guests, Carson had little patience for those who brought prescript material and refused to engage. Naturally, Bob Hope was famous for doing that, bringing overlong clumsy highlight reels that left Carson frustrated. Carson didn't like being reduced to a prop who just set up jokes. Frank Sinatra Jr., who came off as stiff and overly rehearsed, likely irritated Carson the same way. Carson loved real conversation, not performances. Behind the camera, Carson's personal life was even more complicated. He was married 4 times and none of his first 3 marriages were happy. His first wife, Jody Walcott, partied openly and flirted with other men, fueling Carson's jealousy until they finally divorced in 1963. His second wife, Joanne Copeland, said he had tremendous anger about women and that he would sometimes wake her up by ripping the sheets off the bed, yelling about how hard he worked while she slept. His third marriage to Joanna Holland was filled with fear during Carson's darkest drinking phases. Carson ended up paying heavily for all these breakups, including a jaw-dropping $35 million settlement and a lifetime of monthly payments to one ex-wife. Only when he married Alexis Moss at age 61 did he finally seem to find peace. Still, Carson joked bitterly that taking marriage advice from him would be like getting navigation lessons from the captain of the Titanic. The worst blow of his life came in 1991 when his son Richard, just 39 years old, died in a terrible car accident after his vehicle plunged down a steep embankment. Richard had been taking photos of the coastline when it happened. When Carson returned to The Tonight Show, he was visibly broken, fighting back tears. He showed personal photos of his son and thanked the audience for their kindness. He said the only picture newspapers had used was Richard's driver's license photo and he wanted people to see who his son really was. Carson's grief exposed something that had been hidden for years, his deep regret over his distant relationship with his 3 sons. Despite being the most famous TV host in America, Carson was painfully private. Even close friends said he was deeply uncomfortable in social settings. Dick Cavett once said he had never met anyone as shy in real life as Carson. Carson would sometimes use magic tricks as a shield at parties, something he had done since childhood. He hated interviews so much that he used to hand journalists little cards with pre-written answers like yes, no, and kumquats. When a filmmaker spent 15 years asking Carson for permission to make a documentary about him, Carson always said no, believing The Tonight Show should speak for itself. Carson's drinking was another hidden storm. He admitted that alcohol turned him from a fun-loving guy into someone cold, angry, and sometimes violent. His second wife called living with him a nightmare, and friends said his mood could swing from charming to vicious in seconds. Part of Carson's drinking, they believed, came from his strained relationship with his emotionally distant mother, who never showed pride in him. Even with all his fame and fortune, some said Carson was one of the unhappiest people they had ever met. When Carson retired in 1992, he didn't drag it out. He knew he wanted to leave while he was still at the top. He announced it a year in advance and said goodbye in a simple, heartfelt way. After his final show, he disappeared almost completely from public life. With Alexis Moss by his side, he spent his days traveling, learning Swahili for safaris, and enjoying private dinners with a small circle of friends. Carson didn't miss the spotlight. He had always been a private man, and now he could finally live that way. The night of his final Tonight Show became television history. Instead of having a big lineup of celebrity guests, Carson kept it quiet and personal. Over 55 million people tuned in. The most emotional moment came the night before when Bette Midler sang One for My Baby and Carson teared up, a rare moment of vulnerability captured forever on camera. On his last night, sitting alone on a stool, he thanked his audience with a breaking voice, saying he had been lucky to do what he loved. He ended with a simple, heartfelt goodbye. I bid you a very heartfelt good night. Johnny Carson had ruled late-night TV for 30 years, but when he left for good. Behind the jokes and the fame was a man who battled loneliness, anger, and loss, and who even at the end stayed a mystery to the world that loved him.